Don't give a fuck when you land or not, just let him go. Don't worry about you, ain't gonna be a shitty fight, but you gotta let punches go.
Last round.
You can't wait until they get in. You miss it, bang, go right back. And don't take 30 seconds to start another fight.
Alexander, I'm the best ever. There's never been anybody closer. I'm Sonny Liston, I'm Jack Dempsey. There's no one like me. I'm from Nairclaw. There's no one that can match me. My style is impetuous. My defense is impregnable.
Look at that. Look at that combination. And the two.
I kept telling him he had no punch, he couldn't hit, he's swinging like a sissy, he's missing, let me see your box. I hadn't started damping yet. A tremendous sensational first round, and Hearns gets hurt. Hearns got stunned. Hackle was stunned early in the round. Great first round. Incredible. Perhaps one of the best in middleweight history.
That black guy, he hits hard.
Fire!
Yo, welcome to Hands of Fire, a great debate segment on my channel I'm going to have where I just discuss, just historic debates throughout boxing, trilogies, best skilled fighters, best defensive fighters. So, it's just something I'm going to be doing more often now, along with the podcast with this channel. So I'm going to start off my whole category now with my personal top 5 fighters of all time. Now, I went into a good three days worth of research to really try to look up everything regarding records, achievements, and other top 10 or top 100 list among boxing writers and award, like the Ring, real credible sources. So, along with that, though, I also did, add my personal eye test among all these fighters. So I'm just about certain what the typical top 10 usually looks like, especially with more older established ones. So before I jump into the top 5, let me just go by the honorable mentions that basically would make it inside the top 10 for me, but are just out on the outskirts of the top 5. Starting first is Henry Armstrong, who, of course, goes by Homicide Hank with his just all-out ambush. There's a reason why they called him Homicide Hank. I mean, he was a full-blown attacking fighter, a great offensive fighter, and was able to use that great offensive ability with him through all those weight classes up to middleweight. And I believe he did fall short of that title, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, Henry Armstrong, of course, he's was seen on a few lists. I've seen usually number 10 or number 2, or with pretty much within the top 3 with most of the ones I saw. So I know that's probably against the grain a bit, but fuck it. Another one I have on the outskirts of my personal top 5, because I'm going by fighting ability within this this top 5. For me, I'm really basing this off of the record, resume, skill set, and obviously eras do, kind of knock some fighters, but, given on what they look like for the eye, can make up for that. That being said, I have Joe Louis on the outskirts of my top 5. While he did achieve great historic feats, he, for me, just lacked certain defensive and kind of a minimalized attack. Great mind and everything. He definitely did his thing in the ring with the likes of just about everybody. Some falling short, of course, Rocky Marciano, but no one really gives that really much props. But unfortunately, I feel kind of messed up for that. But I'm, like I said, from what I see off the eye of what Joe Louis gives, I see. Let's just say I see a good few fighters from the 90s to definitely give Joe Louis problems. Also, someone that I really had a hard time. I was really trying to actually find a way to squeeze him into this list, just because he's one of my favorite old timers. But like I said, I'm going off the overall, just even above some certain abilities, what you can do with that talent and at the level. Going to that note, I have Ezra Charles. Like I said, one of my favorite old timers. He, gave some really hellacious and brutal, just flat out entertaining fights, and definitely had the defensive abilities too, to go on top of that. I mean, he was a pretty flashy, slick fighter for his day. Him along with Jersey Joe Walcott. They kind of, while they did get hit flush at times, when they were feeling it and doing their thing and playing out the fight that how they usually do, it's a beautiful thing to watch. But like I said, opposition, it matters. So let's jump into it. Top 5, going in reverse order. Of course, I'm not going to tell you who my top fighter is. It kind of gives you the whole point of not listening to the rest of the podcast, right? Or not podcast, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. It can't be a podcast. I'll upload it to other media outlets. So number 5, Willie Pep, Willow the Wisp, as they called him. Evolutionary when it came to, goddamn, talk about a mobile fighter. This guy was consistently giving you angles. And just all the time, he was able to just squirm his way out through damn near everything. There's the urban legend of him, winning around without throwing a single punch. However, it's been really hard to find that fight or round. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Bert Sugar kind of put an end to that claim and said it kind of wasn't true. But most of the round he did. But he did throw a punch. I'm not completely certain. Anyway, like I said, the footwork was unbelievable. His record was 229-11 with one draw. Now, considering the knockouts that he had throughout his record, he only scored 65 KOs with those 229 wins. So that's just a credit to his boxing ability. With not being able to pack that much of a punch, still had the skills to bring it home for those victories, and like that's just a testament to what he is. Now, the reason why I have him back a few notches is because with all the skills that he has, When he's physically outnumbered, should I say, and this for lack of a better word, Sandy Sadler in particular, a long, lean fighter, taller, I would say about a good 5 inches than Willie Pep, and just gave nothing but problems for Willie Pep, and he could not deal with someone with just physical advantages. And I know that's probably seeming to be asking a lot, but it's been done for other smaller fighters to beat a bigger and stronger opponent, and like I said, it's for that reason I kind of give him I scooch him back to number 5. Number 4. Who we got here? Number 4. Let me make sure. Number 4, Roberto Duran with a record of 103-16 with 70 knockouts. Again, somewhat of a, I guess you would say, a similar approach and attack with Henry Armstrong, and of course that style would be remodeled throughout the eras, but definitely an animalistic approach to when it came to pouncing on his opponent. I mean, Roberto Duran came at you like an emotional rage at times, and I guess that's in a way that's kind of what you could call it eventually, because the Sugar Ray Leonard fight kind of really exposed that. It's really pure emotion that Roberto Duran comes from with his fights, and that's, I believe, how he came into boxing. He was a real rambunctious kid, and was known as El Animal, I believe. His record as a lightweight is really what kind of seals his place. Some people kind of look, or at least I would think some of the younger generation would say, look at me kind of sideways when I have Roberto Duran up this high. But obviously because they think of the losses to Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, and Tommy Hearns. But it's really his lightweight work and his lightweight career that kind of sealed him as to what the Ring Magazine calls the best lightweight, or at least their number one lightweight of all time. He, defended his belt, I believe, 12 times, and then it was where he beat Esteban de Jesus for the third time in their encounter, and won the undisputed lightweight championship. And it was from there that he moved on, and it was real commendable, really, that his style was able to be so competitive at the weight. So, his first championship fight, I believe he had 3 fights at welterweight, and then was able to get the Sugar Ray Leonard fight where he just really played into Sugar Ray Leonard's mind, I guess the way that Leonard would be able to do in their second fight, but definitely challenged his manhood, called him out in front of his girl, and it was almost like one of those Rocky and Mr. T moments where, he invited Adrian to his crib, to his apartment and shit, and definitely got really personal, and it really psyched out Sugar Ray Leonard and made him want to fight just a flat-out street fight. He was just ready to just fuck Duran up, and he, that wasn't the approach for him, that he would later learn. So, and I guess the rematch can be, if you're a real Duran supporter, you could say, oh, well, Leonard was an opportunist for, trying to take advantage of, Duran's celebration after the fight, because it's really then that, he got, I believe, almost 30 pounds over his fighting weight, and, was on a partying tour, really, for, I guess, the month or two. Actually, if I really wish I could pull up the distance within how long the first and second fight between Roberto Duran and Leonard was, but I believe it was I want to say it's definitely under 3 months, maybe 2, but it was definitely quick, and I remember Duran or Leonard saying that was a maneuver for him to try to get the best of Duran. So yeah, most of these great fighters, their records kind of get a little scuffed with the later losses. So Roberto Duran's last 4 out of 3, or 3 out of his last 4 fights were losses, and there was also another 2 just before the win before. I'm getting mixed up now. But yeah, there was a good string of defeats for Duran toward the end. Among Vinny Pazienza was another fight, or I believe 2 fights he had where Pazienza beat him twice. Yeah. So, Roberto Duran. All right, now I go on to number 3, and I gotta do some prep work, tenderize your ear for a minute before I say who my number 3 fighter of all time is, because I know it's going to rile up some people, and they're going to look at me crazy and, think whatever. But, again, I'm going off the full completeness of a fighter. Now, while there's stages in their career where they're not, you still have to give credence to what they became and what they maintained and what they overall shown throughout that career. Am I missing anything? Did I put enough pillows for my landing? All right. Number 3 pick of Hands of Fire, fighter of all time, Manny Pacquiao, with the record of 58-6, which is looking more likely to have one of those numbers change. Word is he's looking to fight in November. Now, let's get back to the actual pick of Manny Pacquiao. While his career began at the age of 16, in 1995, as a light flyweight, young man won his first 11 professional fights. Suffered his first loss to a man named Rustico Torrecampo. He would fight 3 more times and suffer another TKO 3rd round loss by a man named Mendigon Sinsukrat. Sure that last name's spelled wrong, or pronounced wrong. Whatever. Now, the reason I mention these beginnings is because while we know what Manny Pacquiao is of today, when there is an analyzation of his career, his achievements, overall performance, and the overall actual work of the fighter, meaning what they put together in the ring. And Manny, like all of these fighters on this checklist, or at least some more than others, checks all those marks. You know, he burst onto the scene. We all know the 6 weeks notice fight against LeBois, where he blew up on the scene on the undercard of Lewis Tyson. He would then go on to shock us again through the defeat of Marco Antonio Barrera, who was coming off of his war with Eric Morales. He would then fight Juan Manuel Marquez in their first of 4 fights. And, had a judge actually not score the first round wrong, Manny Pacquiao would have won the fight. Now, I know people are already going to give me the backlash. Well, it was still a close fight. I know. I get it. But, nonetheless, scoring error. And, that you usually have a foe that you're usually competitive with. That's true with just about everybody on this list. So that's really not a knock, that you have a match out there and you frequently win them. All right, so let's get over that. Now, we got to remember also that the championships that Manny Pacquiao won throughout these weight classes were the lineal championships. He had lineal titles in flyweight, featherweight, junior lightweight, and junior welterweight and welterweight, which we know. Of course, I don't feel like I need to keep saying this. I feel like I say this just about in either every other podcast, but we know the legitimacy of the lineal title. It's pretty much better than actual belts. Now, when it came down to the skill set of Manny Pacquiao, it grew. It was rusty. When you look at those, VHS recorded tapes of Manny Pacquiao and fighting in the Philippines, a pretty lanky fighter for his weight. It was pretty evident, and it seems that the more he grew in weight, it seemed like he became shorter for some reason. So that's that. But he also was a very ferocious and clearly left-hand power-packed puncher. Unbelievable power when you look in retrospect to the people he was knocking out in higher weights. Now, it was, of course, all a matter of execution. Now, his style made him very vulnerable, and throughout his career, he progressed, I would say, around the second Morales fight is where you really see the left hand, become a weapon, and he definitely made shorter business of Eric Morales into the third fight where he, really got a lot more comfort with it. And, from then on, he grew to really knock guys out with both hands. He had people feared for the left and, had them set up for the, right hook. And I believe, he really reached his peak of abilities, or at least the the peak of his abilities, where you really saw the full display of everything Manny has to offer as a fighter, was, or at least around when he came to the heavier weights, was the David Diaz fight, where he was slipping punches. He was looking like almost an American-style boxer, which is very impressive to me. I mean, still, for me, probably one of his best performances throughout his career. He would also execute that even to a higher weight with Antonio Margarito, which is another display. Now, of course, given the opponent, some say, he was a punching bag, but, he was a very live threat, willing opponent, and this is also a fighter that Mayweather didn't really seem to want any parts of, especially when Margarito was at the peak of his powers, really coming off that first Cotto win. But, of course, the hand wrap allegations kind of really diminishes Margarito even further. So, fortunately, that doesn't really hold too much for, I would say, either more bias or even some neutral. Given that, though, De La Hoya was another excellent performance, where you saw, again, his boxing ability carry him out at the higher weights. Now, some are going to say, De La Hoya was drained because of his appearance when he came into the ring, or at least how he looked on fight night. Now, I distinctly remember on, through the 24/7s of this fight, De La Hoya deliberately made the strategy to be light when he came in. So, it was him going on this whole time saying that he was comfortable at the weight, comfortable in camp. He's really feeling fast. That's why, that's what his game plan throughout the fight, or going into the fight, was. And it seems like, I don't know, a lot of people seem to forget that. It's really only after the fight where, the post-fight interviews where they're saying, oh, I was drained. Well, you weren't drained when you were, flexing in front of the cameras and telling everybody how comfortable you were and how ready you were to, knock, this Filipino guy out. Yeah, so, I really just think guys that say that are just sour grapes. That's all that is. But again, Manny Pacquiao, through his career, gained abilities that really perfected even his own way, because it's really not even a conventional style, the way he fights, that you would really want to, like, even some habits that he has that you wouldn't want to teach, that really only he can get away with, and sometimes he really can't get away with at times. Of course, we've seen that with Marquez and Mayweather, but I would say the Mayweather fight for me was really just a high-stakes chess match, Very careful two fighters, really trying not to give really much anything. So that's why, most of the biggest punch you've really seen Floyd land through the fight was really just a backing counter right hand. It was nothing that he really could sit on. That was really like a big highlight. And the same with Manny. I feel like there was some punches, or quite a few punches, that were landing that I don't think it seems some saw, but because there was a lot of quick initiating punches and then quick counters and then a wrap. So it was always really hard to see who landed what, so. But yeah, losses come with the territory. So it's really the body of work here. And again, the abilities. And with all that being said, that, throughout this whole, at least my proclamation of Manny Pacquiao being number 3 is, for me, he is one of the best offensive fighters of all time. So, I mean, I don't know how that rubs some of you guys, but, that's me, man. Now, I think now we're down to the top 2, and this is where it gets kind of less controversial, because I think just about everybody has, or at least most, if not every boxing fan has these 2 fighters in their top 2, and it's really just a matter of who is in what position, like where do you have whoever. So, I have Muhammad Ali as my runner-up of the best fighter of all time. Now, again, I talked about how, when it came to Joe Louis, how while his, defeats were, or I'm sorry, not defeats, but his victories were historic, they are somewhat sensationalized because of that, and I feel like it's because of that they give certain placements for things. So that's why some would maybe even have Joe Louis where I have Muhammad Ali. But again, this comes down to the ability. And when you talk about, man, an array of just great skills on a great frame. You couldn't create or mold a better heavyweight. And clearly with him being number 2, I have him as the best heavyweight of all time. And that might have given away who I have number 1, but so be it. But Muhammad Ali, it's a uniqueness that really can't be replicated, I would say, in quite some time. Because with him, at least coming up, Muhammad Ali was a pretty thin and a really light heavyweight. And, the speed that you would, of course, would expect on a skinnier fighter in the heavyweight division, where of course most heavyweights aren't as, at least then weren't as big, but they were definitely, they definitely packed some mass on them, some, enough meat on them to absorb some punches, and it was for that some. And the heavyweights perceived him as, being straight up food. And it was, mostly guys that were, of course, like Sonny Liston, who thought they were able to just bully and just out-muscle him and beat him down. And it was his speed, but the unexpected power that he would get when he, started to fill out. I would say he just started to, he broke his. I would say he looked a little bit bigger. He started looking bigger with Henry Cooper, but the Liston fight he showed some definitely some good perseverance dealing with the maybe tampering of Vaseline on Sonny Liston's gloves, but he worked with his speed, his footwork, and of course, this is one of the bonuses. While power is natural, and of course, the saying is, any fool can knock somebody out, but it's a skill that makes it complete. And for him, I would say that's kind of course, like Willie Pep, not to that far an extent, but he wasn't really well known for his knockouts, but when the perfect punch is thrown at the perfect speed or the right place, it's gonna knock you out. And that's another that's really more kudos to his career overall for that. Now, of course, we know him being banned, of course, knocking off 3 years of his prime, but even in the 70s mold of Muhammad Ali, where he's clearly more filled out, and I would say it was around his second fight with Frazier, man, he really had really personified almost like a superhero build, and the speed was still there, not to what it was, in 68, but, he, still had the speed to really get to just about every heavyweight out there, and had a chin on top of the great defense. He did eat some punches that we've seen from the Thriller in Manila, where, damn, man, you really saw the chin of him. The footwork, again, is really, it's pivotal to how some of these guys really, make up their whole style overall. With Willie Pep, it was more pivotal, more like off the swing and, just before engagement. Durant was more of a flat-out attack and footwork. Manny Pacquiao, again, is a darting attack and swift attack and footwork. For him, it was just more on the back step that, he at sometimes would be good, sometimes not, and would get him into trouble. But Muhammad Ali could really just put you into position on where he could do his best work. And with his style, again, lacking the power, would be more or less just flat out beating you down and outwitting you through that process. And for that, I got to give him all the props in the world. I mean, and the crazy thing is how great he is in the ring. That's really only speaking to the half of his overall greatness as a person. And again, rest in peace, Muhammad Ali, because, like I said, that's just the half of his greatness. So, like I said, I might have given away who my number one pick is, but to no surprise for some, Sugar Ray Robinson, with the record of 173, 19, and 6, with 108 knockouts. Now, this man was 85-0 in his amateur career. Now we know for most of us know his original name is Walker Smith Jr., and it was through the amateur system that he gained the name Sugar Ray Robinson because a club was lacking a fighter, and he filled in for them. So the reason I mention that is because under the name of Walker Smith in his amateur career, he has 2 losses. So just a little Snapple bottle cap fact. But yeah, so he went undefeated in his first 40 fights until losing to Jake LaMotta, whom he would have another 5 fights and another 5 victories. And he would lose lose an opportunity to win the light heavyweight championship to Joey Maxim in a sweltering heat Yankee Stadium, where the ref was even had to be changed. They had to exchange referees who almost fainted, or did fainted, which is why he was removed. That's I realize that sounds like an excuse, but I mean, it's just, you just gotta expect in today's conditions that that wouldn't happen today. So that's the only reason why I mentioned that. Now, after the Maxim fight was Sugar Ray Robinson's initial retirement. Now, had he stayed retired, his record would have been 131-3-2. He defeated a total of 16 future reigning or former world champions in his career. Among them, Jake LaMotta, Henry Armstrong, Kid Gavilan, Randy Turpin, Gene Fulmer, Carmen Basilio, and so he definitely had the names of, at least, and especially at his time, of the who's who. And when it comes to the ability, for me, and I really have become unmoved from this position of flat out believing that Sugar Ray Robinson is the best fighter I have ever seen. Now, one of the arguments I get for saying that is, well, how do you know what his fights look like? You weren't around to you weren't around to be a fan of his. I can look in retrospect and say, hey, I like that guy's fighting style, right? That's a given. But there's YouTube, there's fight film websites, there's ESPN Classic, and especially around when I was growing up, or at least when I was younger, you go to Sports Century specials, or ESPN Classics, where they showed all those old fights, real late at night. I've seen enough to know what I'm seeing. And it sounds funny, but I mean, me hearing that sounds funny, because look, I just know what I'm seeing. All right. Now the true prime career of Sugar Ray Robinson is the mid 40s to early 50s, and I believe there's 3 pretty decent quality videos that are available to on YouTube to watch. There's also some just maybe one round or just skim of fight highlights of a few too, around the early 50s. But it's not hard to fathom film production in history. I mean, I think we all recall seeing these World War II videos or films, and that was in early to mid 40s. So yes, there's footage out there, and if you're curious enough, you might see it. Now, again, this isn't about the detractors. It's about the fighter. And when it comes down to the fighter, you talk about a full mold of the complete fighter for me. Now, I said Muhammad Ali was a mold of the best heavyweight you could produce. I think what is extracted from let me rephrase it. It's really Muhammad Ali is the extracted form of what the perfect mold fighter is, and that perfect mold fighter is Sugar Ray Robinson. You talk about the guy, like I said with Manny Pacquiao, who checks off the list. Yeah, he gets checks off the list, but there's also check pluses that you get along with that. Now, we're familiar with the American boxing style. It's kind of, it's really almost more of like a Sasquatch search of really to who developed the moving and elusive fighter, but the one to really first just do away with it was Sugar Ray Robinson. Had the footwork to get in and out of position, to really just move his opponent around into ways that, one, slipping at the same time, but creating an atmosphere for himself to really wind up on punches. So really just I would say almost more charging up his punches to the natural power that he already had. Again, is another check. The speed that he delivered it, which pretty much gave it a more of an aftershock. And on top of it, with that footwork, is the, slipping and, just, oh, man, it's, you really do get kind of lost with words when it comes to certain people. Pause, but it's, when you see something, or at least come into full acknowledgement of something that might be the best thing you've ever seen, you just sit back, man, and it's hard to think that that's really can be disputed as much as it can be, or at least as much as it has been. But when you have a fighter that can put you into positions on where he can punch, and has the speed to land at the time he wants, has the power to almost get you out when he wants. And when I say speed, I'm also talking about being fast and quick. Fast meaning he can initiate, fast being where he can punch in combinations and get off, a shitload of punches. And quick being to being able to initiate the opponent, like with a jab, or just basically catching the opponent off guard. And again, the defense and slipping and on top of it, the chin, which is, if it's hard to hit the guy enough, and then when you do land, you gotta do it, harder and more often. It's dwelling on the mind. So, I'm trying to figure out anything else left to say. I mean, this guy, was fighter of the decade for the 50s, and that's by by the unanimous outlets. Really, it was mainly just two, and that was The Ring and I don't have it on me at the moment. But also to I think that kind of just wraps it up. But to one more thing I forgot to mention on Manny Pacquiao is what he was also fighter of the decade by a unanimous decision of pretty much just about everybody, any meaningful body of boxing. Was it ESPN fighter of the decade, The Ring fighter of the decade, the WBC fighter of the decade, the WBO fighter of the decade, HBO's fighter of the decade. Of course, that just kind of, in-house pat on the back. And also had Guinness Book of World Records for most boxing world titles in different weight divisions. And we know the 8 divisions and 10 titles. 10 titles in 8 divisions, if I threw anybody off by that order. So, that wraps it up for me. You guys let me know what you think. Who do I have out of order? Who am I missing? Who shouldn't be on here? And let's chop it up. Peace.